No, no, no. Absolutely not. No way, nah left my yard. I'm not voting. Does this sound like you? Because if so, I want to try and change your mind. Gonna give you 3 reasons why I think you should vote. Then you can tell me if I've convinced you. I'm Dion Jackson Miller. Thank you so much for watching. Time for tea. So I know a whole heap of people absolutely said they're not voting, and we can talk about the reasons in just a little bit. But as I said, I want to give you 3 reasons why I think you should vote. Also, if you're one of those people who always votes or almost always, I want to hear from you as well. Tell me what gets you into that voting booth all the time. And yes, I almost always vote. I think voting is important. I think maybe there's one election I didn't vote in, and that's because I was living in Montego Bay at the time. So my vote was in Montego Bay, but I'd come into Kingston to work with RJR. Now, as you probably know, the voter turnout has been dropping pretty steadily over the years. Not sure you know how bad it is. So here's a look at some of the stats. So I'm just looking at what has happened since independence, all right? And we used to vote. We used to turn out and vote. So the 1962 election, we had 72.8% voter turnout. 1967, it went up to 82%. So that's like 8 out of every 10 registered voters came to the polls in 1967. In 1972, still pretty high at 78.8%, and in 1976, 85%, and then in 1980, the highest we've seen, this is 86.9%. That's nearly 9 out of every 10 voters who turned up. And of course, that was a year that the people turned up to vote in the JLP and vote out Michael Manley's PNP in a massive landslide. So 1983 now, we're at 29%. That year, though, was an anomaly. That was a snap election. The PNP decided not to contest. A lot of people just never go vote at all because, there was no real choice. So in 1989, we had 78% voter turnout. So we're still pretty high there. That's nearly 8 out of every 10 registered voters who turned out in 1989. Now, 1993, this was a pretty steep fall off. We're down to 60% registered voters turning out. That's 6 out of 10. And then 1997, up a little bit to 65%. 2002, we're at 59%. 2007, we're at 61%. So we're now, for the past few elections, here in the region of about 6 out of 10 registered voters turning up. 2011 now, we had another drop to 53%, and we're really starting to see the decline here. In 2016, for the very first time, voter turnout dropped below 50%. Only 48% of registered voters turned up, and then in 2020, we had, call it 38% of registered voters coming out to vote. That's about 4 out of 10 registered voters. So from a high of about 87% in 1980, voter turnout in Jamaica fell to a historic low of 38% during the general election in 2020. And what that means for the party in power is that the Jamaica Labour Party won the 2020 election in a landslide with 56% of the popular vote, but actually only attracted 21% of the total number of registered voters, meaning out of all the registered voters, 1 in 5 voted for the party that went on to form the election. And that is, you're going to expect to see that when you have these kinds of falling numbers. So these figures are actually pretty alarming if you're concerned about voter turnout. And yes, the 2020 general election was in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. So of course, we're going to see what happens this year. But bear in mind, we obviously have been seeing a significant trend in terms of that decline in voter turnout. So, how to counter that? And here are my 3 reasons why I think you should vote. Number 1, honestly, this one is really, really big for me. I think you should vote because you can. On election day, I feel the weight of my ancestors, right? I think about the fact that Jamaica did not get universal adult suffrage until 1944, meaning that all adults of voting age could vote regardless of whether they were a man, whether they were a woman, and whether they had property or not, which is one of the things they used to use to stop people from voting. I grew up in St. Thomas, right? So I think about Paul Bogle and the Morant Bay Rebellion of 1865. I think about desperate suffering people who had no vote, had absolutely no way to try and influence the people who are governing them other than protest and rebellion. That desperate walk to Spanish Town only to be turned back. They didn't have anybody to vote for. I lived in Montego Bay for 10 years, so I think of Sam Sharp and the Christmas Rebellion or enslaved ancestors. They never have no vote. Outside of Jamaica, I think of South Africa. I think of the long lines that people stood in for hours and hours to vote when apartheid was finally demolished and black people could walk into a polling booth for the first time and vote for a black president, Nelson Mandela. I think of the female activists in the United Kingdom, the suffragettes who had to fight for the right to vote. They got locked up. They went on hunger strike. They were arrested, all kinds of things. Because at the time, women in the UK did not have the right to vote. People used to say, why would you give women the right to vote? All them are going to do is do what their husband tell them. And that was something, believe it or not, women had to fight for. I think of all of that. And sorry if I sound a little bit sappy, but no, all of that is very meaningful for me. So when I think of the fact that I can, as a woman, as a black person in independent Jamaica, that I can walk into a polling booth and vote for whoever I want to, for me that is so meaningful. It's very difficult for me to conceive of not voting. So that's actually one of my biggest reasons. But I'm not finished. I have two more for you. Second one, voting is actual power. It's how we choose a government. Sounds basic, but it's true. It's one of the ways in which we get to have a say in how the country is run. And let's be clear, I absolutely don't think it's enough. I think there's a lot of lip service paid to people involvement in government that isn't followed through. But I do think that we need to demand more as well. I'll give you one example. I think a lot of the ways in which laws are passed pay lip service to the involvement of people, right? I think that a lot of times you'll see this little ad in the paper saying, okay, a Joint Select Committee of Parliament is hearing submissions for legislation for a bill to be passed into law on a particular issue. And, they give you 2 weeks to make a submission of something for something that takes hours and hours of research and that a lot of people are doing in their free time. I think there's a lot of performative stuff going on when people say they're inviting participation and consultation, but I think we also need to push a little bit harder to make those more meaningful. Once every 5 years, if at no other time, politicians have to come around and beg you to do something for them. Right? They have to ask you, us, to allow us to make them keep them job. We get to decide. Do we want to keep this person in office? Do we want to vote them out? I think that's big. I also think it's a form of power I don't think we lean into enough because we're so afraid of looking green or orange. We're afraid of looking partisan if we call on politicians to talk to us. But I think we need to do that. I think we need to see way more people lobbying. I think we need to see in particular more community and group lobbying. I'll give you one example. I get some really sad messages sometimes about the plight of pensioners, just older people who have done so well, have served this country for years and years and can barely live based on what they paid as pension. So how about pensioners though getting together and calling the politicians in front of them and saying, all right, come, talk to me. Tell us what you are going to do for us. And I know that there might be logistic issues, but I think once every 5 years is something that could be organized. I think there are lots of people that would help if they thought of it in that context. Older people right now are some of the most reliable voters, but the parties take those votes for granted. Why not leverage that dependability? Make them come to you. Make them tell you what they're going to do about your pension. Make them tell you what they're going to do about the issues that are important to you, the healthcare and so on. I think that's something we need to do more of. I think we need to do it at the constituency level. We have the leadership debates every year, the political debates, the national debates. I think every constituency should have a constituency debate. I think every constituency should have a town hall so people can just ask questions of whoever it is who wants their vote. And I think that at election time, that is one time we could get the politicians to listen and to answer your questions. No man, stop make them take you for granted and know so they can send bus and car for you come election day and you're going to come out and go vote. Make them work for your vote. Same thing for young people. There are a lot of issues. I've been talking to young people. There are a lot of issues they're concerned about. A lot of them don't think they're being adequately addressed by the parties. Have a joint meeting of all kinds of different youth clubs. Make them come to you and address you. I think we tend to be a little bit too passive. I think we wait for the politicians to come to us, and I think we need to call them to come to us and answer the questions that we have. And not about their convenience. I think they need to make time in their schedule to come to talk to us, right? Remember, as Loving There says in that song that I love so much, they work for we not work for them. And we are hire and we are fire them. I feel with money we are watch them spend. There you go. Okay, so my third reason kind of related to the second, except that it goes further. You don't think that voting once every 5 years makes sense because you think that politicians just ignore us in between. How about if you thought about voting as voting plus? What do I mean? I mean, not just marking that X and that's it, but instead when you walk out of the polling booth, you know that you voted plus you're going to do other things. You're going to hold them to account. And it can be as simple as writing letters to the paper or posting stuff on social media. They are so responsive and reactive to posts on social media in terms of saying, hold on, MP, you promised this, what happened to it? Hold on, government, you promised this, what happened to it? It can be as simple as that, or it can be a little bit more involved in terms of either joining or starting or participating in some kind of activist group or community group, lobby group, you know. Again, having a community council meeting, having a neighborhood watch meeting, inviting the MP to your citizens association meeting, really, perhaps 6 months into the term, a year into the term, and saying, hold on, where are we now with these promises? What is going on? These are the things we need you to do for us. Church groups, for instance, ask your MP to come and talk to your church group. Again, so people can just ask questions. After church finish, everybody stay back for half hour or hour, and you ask your MP questions. Why not? That doesn't have to be something that only happens at election time. Ask your MP, when are the consultations to put together the constituency development plan? So all of you can go and sit down and give your views and say what you want done in your constituency. And then you have that as a marker that you can check on every few months or once a year or whatever to see, is it going according to plan? Tell your MP they need to have a website, right? Yes, MPs are supposed to be in their constituency on Thursdays. You're supposed to be able to go to the constituency office and talk to the MP. But certainly nowadays, that can't be the only means of contacting your MP. Every MP should have a website that has a portal, so you can just click and send in your concern and send in your question, and that they can get it in that way. You shouldn't have to leave your work and go stand up 2 hours in one line to talk to an MP. Yes, some people still like to do that, and that's important, but you need to also ask your MP what are the other ways of reaching you. And I'm suggesting that when you look at voting as voting plus, it might make a difference to how you see the process and how you see your role in the process. Now, does that mean I don't understand why people don't vote? No, absolutely I do understand. I know people feel that they don't have any choice. I know people feel that there's two sides, you know, it's like a choice between black dog and monkey. No better herring, no better barrel. They're between a rock and a hard place. Am I out of metaphors now? No, one more. People feel it's 6 of one and a half dozen of another, right? They feel both parties are equally bad, equally objectionable. They don't like what they see or they hear from either party, and they absolutely want no part of that. I get it. And I can totally understand when you hear some of the foolishness coming from the two sides. I also know that there are people who feel like they don't like politics and they just don't want to participate. I have to say, I think if we were serious about constitutional reform, we might be able to change some of those feelings if we were to put in place processes that allowed people to get more involved in government. I'll just give you one example. This Constitutional Reform Committee that just finished and submitted a report on recommendations for constitutional reform. I heard a lot of people saying we want a head of state that's chosen by the people. The committee chose to just disregard that because they said they don't think it's workable. Nonsense. Anything can be workable in terms of how we frame it, how we put it together, and what structures we put in place. We can come up with our own model. I keep hearing this thing about this model and that model. What about the Jamaican model? If the people want to vote for head of state, why not figure out a way to allow them to do that? So I think suggestions like that, that actually give the people more power in the process, were very quickly and easily discarded by this Constitutional Reform Committee. And I think that is part of the reason, that kind of approach, that's part of the reason why people are just checking out, because they feel like you don't want to give people, us, any real power. So whenever we come back to this constitutional reform thing, make them know, say you want meaningful reform and you want people participation and real participation. Now, I have to say, I used to be one of those people that say if you don't vote, you don't have no talk, after election day when you complain about things, you don't have no talk. I no longer feel that way, because I do think voting is a choice. I know that people choose not to vote, and I also know that there are lots of different ways in which people contribute to nation building and to governance. People serve on community groups, as I said, citizens associations, various NGOs. I think people lobby for different important things, even protest, believe it or not. People standing up at the roadside with a placard is a way of participation, because they're saying to the government, this is what we want, this is what our concerns are, you need to listen to us. For the same reason, I don't support the idea of mandatory voting. Some countries have that as a thing, everybody of voting age has to vote. I don't support that. I think the right to vote must include the right not to vote. And I think the better way to go is to find meaningful ways to involve people in the process so that they want to get involved and they want to vote. I don't think we're doing that well at all. So having said that, tell me if you think any of my reasons resonated with you, changed your mind, or even just made you think a little. Even if it makes you think a little, I'll take that. I'll be happy with that. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, I want your comments below. If you vote, if you don't vote, why you don't vote, want to hear what you think. Please keep it civil. And as always, do like the video now, share it with somebody you think might be interested, and click the subscriber button if you haven't yet subscribed. Also, click that notification bell so you know anytime I drop a new video. I'm Dion. Thanks so much for watching. Back to tea.